Hello everyone, we're going to be looking at RobotC today, kind of a quick tutorial to help you guys get started, point out a couple of hints that will help you out throughout the unit that we're looking at for control systems, and just kind of make sure that we're on the right track here. So what you're seeing here is just the first boot up that you have for RobotC. It's going to give you a lot of information on what's going on kind of in their world for the VEX equipment stuff. Most of the time for what's on here, you don't really need it. It's just kind of part of their advertisement space. And usually when you're getting started, you're either going to be opening a file from stuff that you've been working on in the past, or coming up here and opening up a sample program. Before we do that, though, there are a couple of settings that you want to make sure are good to go. And it's really on the robot menu itself. So I just went up to my menus towards the top. I'm going to go from robot down to platform type. And you'll notice when you very first log into RobotC for the very first time, it's not going to be where we want it to be. We want it to be on VEX 2.0 Cortex. And then if I go back into that exact same place, I do want it to say natural language PLTW. So do make sure you have that changed. Once you change it one time, you never have to go back and change it at the beginning of a day that you're working on stuff, which is pretty nice. A couple other things that you'll want to check as you're getting acclimated here is we want to make sure that our compiler target is a physical robot. If you've done the other two already, that should automatically switch to physical robot. And same thing here, we want VEXNet or USB. There are uses for these other two. We'll get to those later on, but as we're getting started, this will be the most reliable way to get things rolling. One last thing that I'll mention, you should be alright for the firmware itself, but if you ever find something is not communicating correctly, this is a very easy way to just kind of make sure everything is on the same page. Typically speaking, I tend to avoid the automatically update stuff for the Cortex or the joystick, and just go through the manual update itself first. So essentially, if you go through the manual, you just want to do each of these three. The master CPU, of course, going towards the Cortex itself, and then the joystick going towards the handheld that we'll be using later on in the course. Okay, with those things set up, let's go ahead and just get a sample program going here. So if I go up to File, I'm going to go to Open a Sample Program. And I've been looking around at stuff a little bit ahead of time, so let me go back to what you would see the very first time. You're going to get something that looks like this. And it doesn't really guide you very well. So we want to be using VEX 2. And within VEX 2, we want to use PLTW natural language. So I'll double click on that. And I have something that's a little bit closer to what we'll be working with in this class. Just for the sake of an example, I'm going to just pick other and use a claw example. But you kind of have some things that you can look through for basic movement, for using sensors, or anything along those lines. So what I have here is just some basic code. And the nice thing about these sample programs is it does actually use pseudocode to let you know what's going on. So anything that we're seeing in green is not actually changing the program itself, but it's more of a note to you guys so you can see how their actual programming in the blue and the red is affecting the Clawbot robot. So if I'm reading through this, basically what we're saying, task main, we're starting a program that we want this thing to run. Start motor, so I'm going to have my motor going into port 10 on the Cortex. 127 is full speed, which is kind of a weird rule, but 127 is full speed for our motors that we have. Same thing for servos, that would be the max open for the servos that we have. So we're saying start the motor and wait 0.6 seconds. So it's going to be moving forward for just a little over half a second, and then it's going to stop. Okay, and that was just for the claw motor itself. So that is just opening it up to make sure that it's good to grab onto something. For go forward, they're using the command forward here. They also could have used start motor and just mentioned the other things, but this is just kind of a faster way to be able to make that command. So go forward, wait a couple seconds, and then stop. So it's moving forward for 2 seconds and then stopping again. And then we're just really doing the opposite from here on out. We're just going to close that same claw, so you'll notice it's port 10 again. Stop the motor afterwards, and then back up to where it used to be. A couple of things that will help you guys out as you're getting started. This already has motor and sensor setups, so you can just type in whatever you need and you're good to go. Obviously, if I'm looking at this, there's nothing on port 10, so I'd maybe want to say this is my claw motor. And anytime I go to reference it, I could either just use the port number it's in, or I could have just called it the claw motor itself. In fact, if I sit here and rename this claw motor using the exact same thing, if I compile, it's happy. It doesn't give me any error codes down here on the bottom. And I would, of course, want to go through and change that for everything else, for the actual moving forward motor, I need to go through and add this, and just to make sure everything's on the same page. The nice thing about these, and I actually made a mistake already in my speeding through this, we do want to choose what motor we're working with. So most of our motors are going to be the 393 motors, so we can apply that. But whenever you're working with sensors, it can be really difficult to know the difference between analog and digital, and it feels like you're just memorizing stuff until you get used to it. The nice thing is that it actually gives you some options. So if you're working with a potentiometer, we can see that, well, that's going to be an analog sensor. If I'm looking for something else I'm not finding there, it's probably going to be on the digital sensor side. The weirdest thing is that where it says touch here, that is just a bump switch. I'm not sure why we have different names for it in the VEX kit versus what we have in RobotC, but that's one that frequently I get questions about. Once you have that set up, though, it'll always update stuff towards the top of your code, and that's just what it's using to be able to communicate between the code that you're writing and the Cortex that's actually using it. Whenever you do actually have your code done, or if you've made small changes to this one, compile is how it checks to make sure you don't have any programming mistakes. If you're finding some, this button over here, Fix Formatting, can help just line everything up so it's easy to see if you're missing a bracket or parentheses or anything like that. And then you can click out of it and it'll show you kind of the basic setup for everything going on. And once you have everything else ready, you'll want to click Download to Robot. And obviously, I'm not connected to a robot right now, so it's giving me an error code. But otherwise, it would say here, download it to it, and it's going to open up a debugger menu. One thing I'll mention just really quickly, if you're not finding the stuff that you need in the debugger window, just go up to Robot to Debugger. It'll be so you can actually use it when something's downloaded to the robot, and you can choose if you want to see the motors or the sensors or any of those other values that we'll be working with. Okay. Other than that, it's kind of a pretty cool thing. There's a lot of freedom that you have for this, and it can be a little bit difficult getting started out. But if you're working through stuff using the fixed formatting and just checking through the guide that it has to begin with, you should be on the right track. So if you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, I hope you guys enjoy.